I'm conservative. Of course I am. I used to be a member of the Conservative Party. In the next election, I will most likely vote for the Conservative Party of Canada candidate. But I really don't use the word conservative as much these days as I used to, because I don't think it fits perfectly to the pressing issues that face the world. And when I look around at the people who are often fighting the same fights I am, on the same side that I am, I notice many of them are not traditionally conservative. They would recoil at the word. Obviously, one of the examples I'm thinking about is the pandemic and the lockdowns and the vaccine mandates and other punishments like that. I've told you before my observation that people from all walks of life oppose those traditional liberals who would say my body, my choice when it came to abortion or drug use. They couldn't stomach now being ordered to take a government injection on pain of losing their job or access to public spaces. Labor union members who were appalled that their own union leadership sold them out to the bosses, accepting fundamental changes to the collective agreements without so much as a negotiation, let alone a strike. Green Party types, natural health types, just shocked that their own Green leader was now a backer of Big Pharma. I mean, this little scene, taped right before the 2021 leaders' debates in our election, was just a perfect summary of the Uni Party. Am I right?
We're all in this together.
We've come so far in the fight against COVID, it's time to finish this pandemic for good. So get vaccinated. If you know someone who hasn't, talk to them. For our kids, for our communities, for our economy, it's how we get forward together.
Vaccines are safe and effective for use. Vaccines are the best way for you to protect yourself, your family, and your community. So get vaccinated. Let's fight COVID-19 together.
Pour vous protéger vous-même, pour protéger les plus fragiles d'entre nous, pour protéger l'ensemble de la population, le meilleur moyen connu demeure le vaccin. S'il vous plaît, soyez responsables, soyez solidaires, faites-vous vacciner. Merci.
We all agree getting vaccinated is the way forward. We're all in agreement this is not a partisan issue, so please get vaccinated.
We're united, and it's time to get the shot. Vaccines save lives, they're how we're going to beat COVID, and it's time for everyone to do it. Get the shot.
Get the shot.
I acknowledge that they didn't specifically call for the vaccine mandate or vaccine passports, but that was where the vaccine policy debate was at that moment. It was about to get worse, including bans on flying or taking trains or boats or whatever for the unvaccinated in Canada. I was banned from flying for a year, as I'm sure many of you were. That video was from mid-September 2021. A month earlier, the federal government had indicated that any employees under its power, as in federally regulated industries and government workers themselves, would be mandated to get the jab. And in the campaign, Trudeau, of course, said much, much more. So how gross was that, to have all five party leaders short-circuit any debate and just agree? No wonder they conspired to keep out Maxime Bernier, despite the party being at 5% in the polls, the threshold for joining the debate. I think Pierre Poilievre is better on those issues than Erin O'Toole, and we are out of the crisis, at least for now, but we can never forget how complicit the so-called conservative parties in Canada were on the abridgment of our freedoms and privacy, the federal conservatives under O'Toole, and even worse, provincial conservatives who were actually in power, including Jason Kenney in Alberta and Doug Ford in Ontario. So you see what I'm saying about the word conservative. But what makes me think of this more was my recent trip to Davos, Switzerland to cover the World Economic Forum. It really is a caricature of an evil cabal of ultra-rich manipulators. Klaus Schwab, the supervillain, even with a German accent, and a Nazi father. He's talking about world domination.
When I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now, the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
I've seen some conservatives laugh at that, saying, oh, he's deluded, he's just a braggart, that's nuts, that's just PR. And Klaus Schwab obviously is a braggart and a promoter and a hustler, but it's also obviously true. From prime ministers and actual royalty to leaders in finance and high tech and big pharma and big media, all sorts of green schemers, they really are there at the World Economic Forum. And many of them pay millions of dollars for the privilege of being there. And his young leaders really do go on to run many parts of the world. And my point here is, isn't this what the left used to be against? When I was young and in university and exposed to the organized propaganda of the left, so I'm talking 30 years ago in the 1990s, the left demonized what they called multinational corporations or transnational corporations. It was an insult. They would spit those words. And there's two parts of that, the corporation part, which they hated so much, they even made a hit movie about it, implying that by nature, corporations were like a psychopath. That was the thesis of the movie. And of course, the multinational part was a shot at globalism or globalization, as they called it back then. So that was the left back then, denouncing big business, denouncing billionaires and billionaires who operate in different jurisdictions. The reason the left said they hated multinational corporations was that such companies, they argued, were in a race to the bottom. They would move jobs to the lowest paid workers in the world, so thus taking away good jobs from us and not just going towards cheap labor in China or wherever, but also weak labor laws, everything from union rights to health and safety rules. And of course, multinational corporations sought out places with the weakest environmental rules. And finally, they moved their profits around to pay the least tax possible in whatever jurisdiction, and don't even start on human rights. So those were the accusations of the left. And to be fair, many of them were proven true. But what the leftists didn't talk about was that globalization was only made possible by customers who would buy something made in China because it was a fraction of the price it would cost if it was made in America or Canada. Over time, China in particular, but other poor countries too, became the outsourced factory of our world. And also the outsourced pollution place in the world too. But it wouldn't work if consumers didn't want it, and obviously people vote with their dollars. All I'm saying is that those were the things that the left claimed to care about when it came to capitalism. Now they love big businesses and billionaires and multinational companies. How do they love George Soros, Bill Gates, Larry Fink of BlackRock? How do they love a big private jet secretive meeting in Davos, Switzerland? How did that happen? I remember the foreign policy narrative of the left when I was a student also. The CIA was the source of evil. It had toppled legitimate governments around the world and installed American client regimes. That's where the term banana republic came from, a reference to the CIA toppling third world leaders in Latin America in cahoots with the United Fruit Company, which is now called Chiquita Banana. I was told about the evils of American foreign policy with all sorts of intrigues from countries far away about which I knew little, and to be honest, I never really cared enough to investigate the veracity of the claims. I was skeptical, and if I had to choose between rival world powers, which at the time were, at least before 1989, the Soviet bloc or the American bloc, obviously I would choose the democracies every time, even if they were getting their hands dirty in certain places. But my point is, there was a time when the left hated the CIA, hated foreign policy intrigues, hated what they called neo-colonialism or imperialism or foreign adventures. And now, talking about the CIA, all the big TV channels have actually former CIA officials, including even former directors of the CIA. They're literally embedded in the media. I remember the first Gulf War when CNN had reporters embedded in the U.S. military during the invasion. Now that's flipped around. The CIA is embedded in the media just to make sure they really follow the talking points of the deep state. And the left, they seem to love it. That's an excerpt from my show every night. It's called The Ezra Levant Show. That's me, Ezra Levant. You can see the whole thing behind our paywall. Well, there's a lot of goodies behind there. I do a show every weeknight. My friends Sheila Gunn Reid and David Menzies and Nat and Kat have their shows too. You get a ton of content for just $8 a month. There's so much in there you won't find anywhere else. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.